This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for your company. Last week's CNN presidential debate could go down as one of the worst in history, mostly due to the shocking performance by President Joe Biden. But we have just heard from Donald Trump. He's been caught in a leaked video supplied to the Daily Beast where he revealed what he really thinks about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
What did I do with the debate the other night?
Oh, fantastic.
He kicked that old broken down pile of crap.
Yeah.
It's a bad guy. He just quit, you know. He's quitting the race.
Is that right?
Yep, I got him out of the race. And that means we have Kamala. I think she's going to be better. She's so bad. She's so pathetic.
It's so amazing.
It's just so bad. So
I just can't imagine.
But can you imagine that guy dealing with Putin and the president of China, who's a fierce person? He's a fierce man.
Right.
A very tough guy, and they see him. They probably he can't. But they just announced he's probably quitting.
Good.
Okay?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Just keep knocking him out, huh?
He didn't hold back, did he? Let's bring in journalist and commentator Brad Palumbo. Brad, great to be with you again. I can't wait to get your reaction to the debate, but also what Donald Trump's had to say, because he's been pretty quiet up until now.
Well, that's been the smartest thing that he's done, is just sit down and just zip his lip and let them do all the damage to themselves. At the debate, we actually saw remarkably restrained Trump, which aren't two words that you usually put together in a sentence, but he just let Biden have the spotlight, and Biden did so much damage to himself. And this video was really interesting to me, right? Because he almost seems happy either way. On one hand, he's got Biden, who he's currently beating in the polls significantly with a bump after the debate. And on the other hand, if they do swap him out, they have to basically go with Kamala Harris. And she would be an absolute train wreck in her own right.
Absolutely, and we've got a clip of Kamala Harris to play for everyone a little bit later. But let's stick with the debate for now. Joe Biden has admitted that he nearly fell asleep during that debate, and we all saw it, so that's no surprise. But he's now using jet lag as an excuse. Here's his press secretary being questioned about this.
You did get numerous questions yesterday about the president's debate performance. You didn't mention the travel, the jet lag, the foreign trip. So I think you can understand why it was a little bit puzzling to hear the president mentioning that as his explanation for the first time last night. I'm just, can you clarify whether when you took the podium yesterday, did you not know that that was a major
And I want to say
factor?
that is my bad. That is part of definitely part of the explanation of what had occurred. I did know that. I did know that. I did know that. But we were so focused. I was so focused on the cold, and that's what I kind of leaned into and talked about.
My bad. Brad, what do you make of this? You're certainly not helping the fallout.
No, this is, frankly, gaslighting of the highest order. To try to claim, first they tried to blame Biden's disastrous debate performance on a cold that magically wasn't there the next day when he was at a campaign event. And now they're trying to blame jet lag for a trip that he got back from more than a week before the debate. And then he spent that week holed up doing debate prep that only started at 11 a.m. and he took a break for a nap every day in the afternoon. If he still has jet lag, all that while later, after all those naps and those 11 a.m. starts, that's not much of a defense or much of a case that he's up for the job of president, which is probably the most stressful job in the world. So to me, we are just seeing Democrats who are engaging in this gaslighting light their credibility on fire in real time. And it's honestly insulting. Americans aren't stupid. They're not going to have the wool pulled over their eyes this easily. We saw what we saw. It wasn't a cold. It wasn't jet lag. It was the abject state of a president in cognitive decline. And they need to reckon with that reality, not tell us that what we see isn't real.
And let's just recap how bad it was.
And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
Brad, I want to get your take. Was that the key moment that he lost the debate, or one of many?
Yeah, that was the most entertaining but also painful moment of the debate when Trump hit him with that one-liner and said, "I don't know what he just said, and I don't think he does either," because I laughed out loud. Trump, love him or hate him, the dude is hilarious. But at first I was
Absolutely.
laughing, but then I found myself getting deeply depressed. I mean, this dude doesn't know what he just said. He starts rambling about how they beat Medicare. What, you beat a health insurance program for the elderly? What does that even mean? I mean, and this is the guy with the nuclear codes. I mean, how are we supposed to sleep at night knowing that? So at first I laughed out loud at that moment in the debate, but I've heard from many other people who were in rooms full of liberals, full of Democrats, and the rooms just went silent and got very
Yeah.
uncomfortable very quickly. And I can understand why. It's tough to watch, and frankly, it's kind of scary to watch too.
It's absolutely scary to watch. And I shared a similar journey where there are moments where myself, along with other colleagues in the office, we were laughing out loud because we couldn't believe it. But then afterwards, there was a bit of rage, a bit of anger that this is the leader of the free world and it's not okay. And it's clearly a medical condition, so it's something we probably even shouldn't be laughing at anymore, and it's really sad. But despite the abysmal debate showing, there are still media outlets appearing to cover for Joe Biden. Look at this headline on The Guardian. It reads, "Biden comes out swinging in his first speech after presidential debate with Trump." Are they serious, Brad? They can't be.
They are. Some of them are doubling down. Actually, a surprising number actually have called out the president. Even the New York Times has had several op-eds calling for Biden to drop out, and the editorial board even went so far as to say drop out. But we have seen media. The Associated Press just dropped another absurd article trying to say he was still sharp at 81. They are trying to defend him. They just must hate Trump that much that they're willing to just blatantly lie. They're willing to defend the indefensible. I don't know. As a journalist, I would never debase myself in such a manner just because I hate one politician or like another. I mean, ultimately, your credibility and your integrity is your tools of your trade. And if you light them on fire in service of one election or one politician, you're destroying your own career and your own credibility in the eyes of the public. But what's crazy to me is to try to use this debate, or rather this campaign event that he had the next day as, well, he did great then. He read a teleprompter at a brief speech at a campaign event, but he couldn't go a 90-minute debate with 2 breaks, mind you, without totally losing it and admitting that he almost fell asleep during it. That is not the defense or the get out of jail free card that these people seem to think it is. It's just not.
And if it couldn't get any worse, it's been revealed that Hunter Biden has joined meetings with the president and top aides since his father's return from Camp David on Monday, according to NBC News. Let's look at this.
Hunter Biden has been by his father's side ever since they were at Camp David this weekend as a family, where they had some discussions about the president's potential path forward here and his re-election campaign, and that since he returned from Camp David last evening with his father, we understand that Hunter Biden has even joined some meetings and conversations that have taken place between the president and some of his most senior advisors. It is unusual, according to the people we spoke with, for him to be participating at this level.
And the White House confirmed that Hunter Biden joined advisors to help the president prepare for a speech later that day.
Look, the president, as you know, is very close to his family. This is a holiday week, 4th of July. He spent time with his family, as you all know and reported, at Camp David. Hunter came back with him and walked with him into that meeting, that speech prep, and he ended up spending time with his dad and his family that night. That is basically what happened.
The question, though, would be, is he participating in meetings with senior advisors?
What I can say is that he came back with his dad from Camp David. He walked him into the speech prep, and he was in the room.
Of all the people that Joe Biden could call on, Hunter Biden is who he chooses. Brad, why is he doing this?
I have no idea. It is the worst PR move. It is the most baffling thing imaginable to do in this moment of crisis. Yeah, you know what we got to do? call in the crackhead for career advice for the president of the United States. I mean, Hunter Biden is a hot mess. He's got criminal charges. He's got a drug abuse problem. He's a deadbeat dad. He's not got his own life figured out. So he's not in a position to be giving career advice about the future of our nation or helping the president decide whether to run for re-election or not. It's absurd. Of course, I have nothing against the president seeing his son and spending time in a familial capacity, but to have your son at all, but especially when you have such an irresponsible and criminal son involved in intimate decisions about the presidency in a moment of crisis, I mean, that's not a red flag. That's a bouquet of red flags.
It's such a bad move. And as you said at the start, even the PR angle of this, the optics of it is terrible. But look, not just Hunter Biden, I think we really need to look at Jill Biden. I did a story earlier this week suggesting that she is just as to blame, or she's just as bad as Joe Biden at the moment. The First Lady featured on the cover of Vogue magazine wearing a $10,000 suit where she insisted that Joe Biden will not step aside. Now, look, I'm even seeing left-wing media outlets pick up on this point that Jill Biden is partly responsible for this, and she should be the one tapping her husband on the shoulder saying, look, your time's up, you've done a great job. Some may say, others may not agree with that, but whatever, that it's time for him to let go. Brad, what's your thoughts on Jill?
Look, at this point, the First Lady's enabling elder abuse, and I get that she wants to cling to the spotlight and that this is the most relevant she's ever been. I know anybody human, that like allure of power and attention is going to be there, but your husband is humiliating himself in real time in front of the public and humiliating our country and making us look weak in a time of international conflict and war, and you don't take him aside and say, listen, Joe, we've got to stop. You've got to drop out. If she really was looking out for her husband's best interest, Jill Biden would tell Joe not to run again. She would be counseling him to drop out. And obviously we don't know what she's saying behind closed doors, but based on what she's saying publicly, she is encouraging him to stick in the game. And I think that's really, really disturbing. It's not what you'd expect somebody to do if they have the best interest of their spouse in mind.
Yeah, I think seeing her on the cover of Vogue did her husband no favours. Former Fox News host Tucker Carlson claimed on X that Jill Biden's actions have deteriorated relations between the Bidens and the Obamas while trying to revive her husband's campaign. So I'll read you part of the tweet from Tucker Carlson. It says, from an unusually good source, Obama's tweet supporting Joe Biden was disingenuous. In private, Obama is telling people Biden can't win. Brad, what do you make of that?
Yeah, obviously I can't confirm or deny this report from this source, but it wouldn't shock me whatsoever. We just saw two major Democratic governors, Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer of California and Michigan, respectively, come out with almost verbatim tweets today saying, I support the president in his decision to run again. It's like the talking points have gone out from up top. But behind the scenes, I think almost all Democratic politicians and operatives and even media personalities are admitting that something is wrong here. Will they cling to Joe and just decide to stick with him? I actually think so. I do think he will stick it out. I could be wrong, but I think he has a little bit of a God complex. He thinks he's the only one who can beat Trump and save America from what he views as the horrors of a second Trump term. So I think he'll stubbornly cling to it. But no, I'm sure if we could see the group chat with Obama and a bunch of other Democrats right now saying what they really think about Joe Biden, it would be totally different than the PR tweets they've been encouraged by the White House to put out. I don't take a lot of that at face value. Obviously, that's PR speak more than truthful, honest analysis.
Absolutely. Would love to see that group chat as well. Nearly a third of Democrats think that Joe Biden should end his re-election bid after his poor debate performance against Donald Trump, according to a new Reuters and Ipsos poll. We also know that Joe Biden is going to give his first post-debate interview with the ABC. Brad, what can you expect? Are you surprised that he's actually going to front up to the cameras again?
Well, no, because he's got to do something to do damage control on this disaster. But what was interesting is that originally this ABC interview was going to be a cut up, like a package of highlights from an interview edited down. They've now announced they're doing it live, I think as a full hour, just live to tape, like as a special. That's much better because we'll actually get to see him in real time. I was worried they were going to do a PR job for the White House and just make him look good in the edit, because that's what we've seen him do in the past. This president has actually notoriously avoided difficult or at all critical interviews and heavily favored, one, he's given far fewer interviews, and two, heavily favored extremely friendly softball interviews in controlled settings. So it'll be good to see him again, but I mean, he can't really do any worse, I guess, is the best you could say. But even then, I don't think people will really be reassured just because he does one interview that's okay. I mean, we saw what we saw, and even if he, and this is true for a lot of older people, and again, there's no shame in this. There's no shame in aging. It's just the clinging to power that's the problem. They have better moments and worse moments. So even if this interview captures him in a sharper, more lucid state, that's ultimately not reassuring when you know he's going to still be having days like he had on the debate stage where he can hardly string a sentence together and looks like he barely knows where he is and is struggling to stay awake.
I agree with you. I think the damage has been done. But since the debate, there's been an even bigger focus on VP Kamala Harris. We heard from Donald Trump at the start of the program. He believes he'll be up against her. Let's listen to what she's had to say recently.
No, Taraji. Now, you know I wouldn't do that, especially not to a fellow bison. The real, ain't you? You know. So what's on your mind?
Oh, Madam VP Harris, I'm worried about the election. Women's reproductive rights are on the line. Our Supreme Court is on the line. Our basic freedoms are being tested. Madam VP, I know you've been traveling across the country. What are you hearing?
Yeah, girl, I'm out here in these streets. And let me tell you, you're right, Taraji. There is so much at stake in this moment. The majority of us believe in freedom and equality. But these extremists, as they say, they're not like us.
It is so cringe. But let's listen to another clip that's been going viral on social media.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know? What can be unburdened by what has been.
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 What we can see, what we believe can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Who we can be unburdened by who we have been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Where we can be unburdened by where we have been and unburdened by where we are right now.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Why is she saying that, Brad? What?
I've probably heard her say that 1,000 times at this point. I still have no idea what it's supposed to mean. I mean, but look, I have to say that Kamala is just cringe personified. She literally, in the first clip you showed, put on a fake black accent that she does not have, talking about, I've been out in these streets. She doesn't speak like that. She went to elite academies growing up. She doesn't have that urban dialect whatsoever. It's totally inauthentic. How is that not deeply offensive to pander to black people and adopt a fake accent when you're speaking to black entertainment television? Like, I obviously am not black. I can't speak for them. I would find that very reductive and offensive if I was, though. And it's just, she is a terrible politician. We know this. And unfortunately, and I know this is going to be controversial to say or whatever, but when the Biden campaign was picking a vice president and they picked Kamala Harris in 2020, they weren't picking who they thought would be the best backup president. They weren't thinking who'd be best on the campaign trail. They were thinking about who would check the identity politics, diversity boxes of a black woman that they needed because it's already problematic enough, among the woke identity politics Democratic base to be running a white man, a white straight man as your candidate. Okay, well, we have to have some diversity and equity in our VP slot. So what they did, we all know this. I'm just being real with you. If she was a white male senator from California who'd never won an election outside of a deep blue state, there's no way he would have picked her as vice president. So what we have is somebody who was put in the job for reasons unrelated to merit and competency, who might be thrust into the limelight, and she hasn't done well when put in the limelight as vice president in the past. Even there's been reports that within the Biden White House, they're really disappointed in her and think she's done a poor job and try to keep her away from the important events and cameras. So look, it's not a great situation either way for the Democrats. They either have a guy who doesn't know where he is and looks addled and confused at random times, or they have someone who's clearly not up for the job, isn't a very good politician, and has just a lot of weird, cringeworthy things that she says, and has never actually won an election in her own right at the top of a ticket in any sort of swing state or battleground, or she has no appeal outside of liberal elites, which they've already got, but she has no appeal to moderates or independents or Midwest voters or anything like that.
Well said. The Democrats have created this mess, and oh gosh, they've got a lot of work to do if they have any chance between now and November 5. Brad Palumbo, great to get your thoughts. So great to speak with you. Thank you for joining us again on Power Hour.
Thank you.
It's expected in a matter of hours the UK is going to have a new Labor government after 14 years of Conservative rule. Let's bring in financial entrepreneur and geopolitics expert Dr. Roger Giewolb. Roger, great to speak with you again. What does a Labor victory mean for the UK?
Many people are pretty bleak about it. It means they are saying open borders, tons more immigration, higher taxes, as is always the case with labor. They say more wokeism. It's incredible that we Brexited 4 years ago to get away from lefty, woke, rigid, nonsensical policies as they were seen. And now Europe has moved to the right and are acting like Brexiteers, with actually talk of some European countries actually exiting the EU now, whereas Britain is, the UK is heading towards total wokeism and a society that is just unrecognizable from what traditional Britain and its values have been.
Why do you think that is?
Poor leadership, basically. We've just had terrible leaders on both sides, and we still do. We have people who just are not leaders. They are managers and not necessarily very good managers. And I think that I would personally say that Labor's victory, if indeed it is a landslide, and that's not 100% certain yet, I can come back to that if you want. But I mean, I think that Labor's victory is more than anything a function of how angry people are at the Conservative Party, because the politicians who've led that party, especially recently, have manipulated, gaslighted, demeaned, mistreated over and over the public that elected them. They've been wholly irresponsible to the British electorate, and they aren't conservatives. They're as close to Labour as you can get. So, Gabriella, much of the media refers to them as the uni party. They don't even call them two parties anymore.
Let's talk about Rishi Sunak. It's hard to find an article where he's being praised. Almost all of them he's being pretty harshly criticised. What would you say his legacy will be?
Probably one of the worst prime ministers and worst political leaders in a very long time. Somebody who is just, despite all his photo opportunities, rolling up his sleeves and trying to be one of the lads, somebody who's just so out of touch with the country and its people. He puts on a good act, of being, a man of the people, but his actions just belie that every time.
Well, look, that's tough, but I'm tough but fair. Let's talk about some of the issues with this election. Cost of living is a big one. How would a Starmer government balance social spending and also the issue of inflation?
I think if they were going to do something about the cost, it's very puzzling. If they were going to do something about the cost of living, if they were going to do something about inflation, if they were going to do something about interest rates that don't need to be as high as they are, you would have thought that they would have used that to beat the Tories over the head any time in recent years. But I mean, they've really been very silent about it all. They've talked about other things, if they've talked at all. I mean, they basically played a game, Labor, which obviously is a strategic game, where they haven't really come out with what their policies are or what their plans are, to the point that they've been criticized for being something of an empty vessel and have no plans and no ideas and no clue what they're going to do if they got into power after so long. But I mean, I think the game that they're playing is, if you don't put something out there, then people aren't going to be able to shoot at it. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell what they will do, but I would imagine they will not reverse the Tory policies on interest rates, inflation, and pretty much all the rest. They will simply raise taxes, especially to fund all sorts of climate change and other now kind of out of vogue issues. They'll bring those back, and everything pretty woke and pretty left wing, they will fund, and they'll just print money. And I don't think Labor has ever worried about that.
What about foreign policy? And also, how would a Starmer-led Labor government deal with the anti-Israel marches that we've seen erupting at pro-Palestinian university encampments? Also quite severe criminal attacks on Jewish businesses. How do you see this changing? Will the UK change its support of Israel?
Yes, I think they probably will, despite their protestations otherwise. I think it will not be good for Jews and not be good for Muslims, because Muslims are suffering from Islamophobia from the ordinary, sort of white British bloke in the street who's not very happy with the protests. And I know Muslims who tell me they go out and they get glared at now by British people, even though they're British themselves, and they don't like it either. I think it won't be very good for race relations, but they will, I think, keep the borders open to more and more people coming from countries for what they can get here, rather than any particular devotion to the United Kingdom. And I think relations with Israel will become worse. I think that Ukraine is another issue where they will probably keep giving them a lot of money, even though it seems that Zelensky is not going to win the war. And negotiations, I don't think Britain is enough of a factor to directly influence that, but I think that'll become problematic too. It's not good. I mean, I hope I'm very surprised. I want to be very surprised, but people are pretty scared. The Tories are saying that people are so frightened of Labor that they may still be able to stay in, because at the last minute in the voting booth, people are just going to say, I'm so scared of these guys, I'm still going to vote Tory.
Concerning times ahead. We'll stay across it with you. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has emphasised that immigration should be the biggest issue in the upcoming general election. Here he is.
If I paid you £70 now, would you admit that this country would be nothing without our rich history of immigration?
Well, I tell you what. And this is what's gone wrong. Because you talk about immigration, and it ran from after the war up until the millennium at net 30 to 40,000 a year. And yes, it worked. In fact, we had the most successful immigration policies of any country in the whole of Europe. No question. Now it is so totally out of control. Just think about this. 2.5 million people have come in the last 2 years. You wonder why you can't get a house. You wonder why your rents have gone up 25% in 4 years. You wonder why our infrastructure is struggling. You wonder why we have to build a new house every 2 minutes just to cope with the numbers. And that's the issue. It's now running at numbers that are literally unimaginable and are diminishing the quality of life of everybody in this country. And frankly, this should be the biggest issue of this election.
He makes a lot of sense. Nigel Farage later declared a boycott of the BBC, accusing it of bias after that appearance on Friday night's Question Time. In a post to X, the 60-year-old wrote, "I've just been invited to appear, but I'm refusing until the BBC apologises for their dishonest Question Time audience. Our state broadcaster has behaved like a political actor throughout this election. Reform will be campaigning vigorously to abolish the licence fee." Roger, what's your take on this?
Well, I think the news cycle has moved on from that. I think that I think the lady is right about immigration. Immigration certainly has helped to build this country, America, many other countries, but a certain amount of immigration. Nigel is right that there's just a pandemonium going on now with illegal immigration, people who aren't processed, people who just come flooding in and can't be dealt with. That's the problem. It's not the question of, there's nothing wrong with, there's everything right with immigration. There's nothing wrong with controlled, monitored immigration that's done properly. But this has just gone out of hand, and I don't think that Labour will be able to do much more about it. Now, Nigel boycotting the BBC because of that allegedly rigged audience the other evening, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, he's far from the first person to accuse the Beeb of serious bias in all sorts of ways. But what has moved on in the news cycle, Gabriella, is that Nigel has come under fire, and Reform has come under fire for being a racist party. They were accused with a Channel 4 investigation of a man who called Rishi Sunak a terrible, vile, racist slur and said that immigrants should be used for target practice. And they found all sorts of people, who said horrible things. Now, actually, you can find that in any party, and it isn't necessarily a reflection on Reform, but the media wave has rather gone against him. And what I'm referring to that is new is that he has announced today, as released in several media outlets, that had he known that Reform was such a shambles and that people were not vetted as carefully as they should have been, and various other things, not that he would have thought twice about coming back, but that, he would have done something about it. He was shocked at the terrible shape the party is in. And so I think that their rush of voting, their huge momentum has been stopped in the last 24 hours. And I don't expect them to do as well in the election as I did yesterday.
I did see those reports. I don't know how I feel about that argument that Nigel Farage is shocked and Reform UK, he didn't realise it was as bad as it was, and that's what he inherited. I think making those claims just so close to the general election, I'm not sure how well that will go down with voters. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, one particular media outlet, and there may have been others, but that one particular media outlet referred to him as throwing Richard Tice, the man who has led Reform the past few years, under a bus. He threw Richard Tice under a bus. And I don't understand the strategy of him doing that and distancing himself from the Reform Party so close, so many hours before the election. I don't get it. I really can't understand how that would have benefited either Nigel or Reform. And Nigel is not a man who does things unthinkingly. So I haven't figured it out yet, but it's not good. And I don't think it's been helpful for Reform, all of this bad publicity, even though, as I say, I'm sure every party, I mean, I don't want Green Party people calling me up yelling at me, but I'm sure even the Green Party has people that say horrible things about executives of fossil fuel companies or capitalists or, I mean, every party's got nutters in them. And you can't turn around and say that's a racist party. But the media has managed, because they really do go for Nigel, they have managed to make him a bit of a devil, and he's fought it off as best he can. But I don't understand this capitulation of saying, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was, such a mess and so bad. Yeah.
Roger, before I let you go, I want to get your take on the US election, the CNN presidential debate. How was Joe Biden? You've heard my opinion. What do you make of it?
I've got a lot of people contacting me, asking me, how in the world can his family let him stand up there and suffer like that and put him through this? Well, it seems that his family, don't want to lose the fancy dinners at the White House and the rest. And of course, he's got Barack Obama behind him, who wants his fourth term, because as many people acknowledge, this is actually Obama's third term right now, and he doesn't want to lose another one. But Joe Biden is a mess. I mean, he made this statement, as you know, that he was tired, he was jet lagged, because he had traveled around the world a few times and gone through, quote, it literally said, hundreds of time zones. Well, I mean, he went to Raleigh, North Carolina. He went to Paris. He went somewhere else in Europe. I didn't see him going to Brisbane. I didn't see him going to Seoul or, he didn't go around the world, and he certainly didn't do it several times. And if he crossed 100 time zones, that was probably in his own mind. I mean, he's trying to make excuses. There is no way to kick him out from either office that he holds right now, nominee for the Democratic candidate for president and president of the United States. He's basically, without a lot of difficulty, got to leave that himself. And there are some statements coming out that that's what he's really contemplating doing, but he hasn't gone yet. And his own people are now starting to say, hey, man, you got to go. So I think, I don't know how the Democrats let this situation develop. It's crazy. My prediction is that sometime in the next few weeks, he will stand down. I mean, I don't think he's going to be the man at the Democratic National Convention.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't see how he could actually run when it actually comes to November 5. Roger Gewolb, so great to speak with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Wimbledon Tennis Championships are underway, and all eyes are on the Royal Box to see if Princess Catherine may make a surprise appearance at the iconic event. Riley Sullivan is a reporter here at skynews.com.au, and he's always across the latest headlines from the royal family. Riley, great to see you.
Great to see you.
Wimbledon has kicked off, and this week there are fresh hopes that Princess Catherine could show up in the Royal Box, or possibly to hand out trophies during the finals. What's the All England club had to say about Kate actually making an appearance?
Yes, so Wimbledon's underway. The tournament kicked off earlier this week, and there are fresh hopes that Kate could come. Of course, she is the patron of the All England Tennis Club, and the club chair came out last week and confirmed that they have not yet found a replacement for this year's tournament. Therefore, they're working with Princess Kate, and obviously based on her health and her condition, about possibly her fulfilling her role this year with the trophies, which would be so exciting. It's such an iconic English event. I think it's really one of those events where it has the mystique of the Royals, having the Royal Box there, and it's one of those rare opportunities for the public to go and see their favourite Royals up close. And we also know that this is an event that is very close to Kate's heart. She's a massive tennis fan. So I think everyone's just really hopeful that we'll be seeing her out on the court very soon.
Absolutely. Fingers crossed. I hope to make it over there for Wimbledon one day and catch a glimpse of the Royals.
Amazing.
ESPN has announced that they'll honour Prince Harry with the prestigious Pat Tillman Award for the service at the ESPY Sports Awards. But the decision has sparked controversy. Why are some critics slamming the decision?
Right. Well, these ESPY Awards, they go on every year. They're hosted by ESPN. And they're kind of like the Oscars of the sporting world, but there are these sort of obscure awards that are not necessarily related to like a specific sport. And the Pat Tillman Awards, like a very prestigious honour. It honours a former NFL player who left the sport to go and fight in Afghanistan after 9/11, and unfortunately he died in combat. So, you know, it's certainly, there's a sombre aspect to it, but it's really honoured, it's really given to people who do significant things in the charity world. And I think that for Harry, I mean, he's getting it in recognition of Invictus. I think that few people would argue that Harry's done some amazing work with veterans and with the Invictus Foundation, but certainly some people have come out. Piers Morgan was one, even family members of Pat Tillman, and said that they didn't think it was appropriate that Harry's getting the award.
Yeah.
It's complicated, but you know what? I think as long as they're drawing attention to worthy causes, I mean, I don't really see an issue with it.
Yeah, fair point. We heard this week that Meghan's new podcast with Le Monde Media is moving forward. This is just 1 year after Spotify canned her previous podcast, Archetypes, and fired the Sussexes. But why is Meghan reportedly struggling to book guests for her new show?
Yes, so this new podcast is finally moving forward. It was announced now nearly 6 months ago. Of course, it was a year ago that Spotify fired the Sussexes. That ended in tears. Afterwards, you know, an executive came out, called them effing grifters. I mean, it was quite colourful language. And, you know, to Meghan's credit, she's sort of picked herself up. She's inked this new deal for another podcast. It's with quite a niche company. It's not Spotify. It's not, you know, the backing of Spotify. And apparently this is really what's making her struggle to book guests. Obviously, with Archetypes, it was quite a straightforward show. She would have 1 or 2 guests on per episode, and they were big guests. You know, she got people like Mariah Carey on her show. So certainly Serena Williams was another one.
Okay.
You know, so it was A-list talent. But with this new show, I guess when you don't have the backing of Spotify and maybe, you know, it has been a few years now and the Sussexes aren't as necessarily in the media or as loved, I think she's struggling. But I reckon a good guess would be Priyanka Chopra Jonas, because we know that she's a close friend of Meghan's even before Meghan was a royal. So one of her few friends from the before days, and she did an interview Priyanka on Archetypes. So I reckon that would be like a safe bet. But other than that, some people suggested maybe she could start interviewing like her Suits co-stars.
Yeah, if they'll speak to her, if they'll agree to it. See, that's the challenge.
But I reckon she should do like maybe like a Suits, like a rewatch podcast, because you know how those are really popular, and just sort of lean into the Suits thing. But
I wonder how many people want to hear from her though, as opposed to the other Suits cast members. I love that show. I tell you what, I didn't love Meghan's podcast, but when I listened to it last year or whenever it was, didn't grab me.
All right then, we'll see how this goes.
We'll see if she gets the guest that you suggested. But Prince William is reportedly leading the charge to keep Harry and Meghan away from royal occasions over his concerns about the Sussexes leaking information. So why are some experts now comparing Will to his grandfather, Prince Philip?
Right, well, this is an interesting comparison because, I mean, anyone who has an interest in the royals will know that during, you know, Queen Elizabeth II's reign, her husband Prince Philip was really the gatekeeper. Like, he was obviously close to his wife, but he also just sort of oversaw a lot of the like hierarchical dynamics of the royal family, and he was kind of like a tough sell. Like, infamously, Princess Diana was not on his good side, Fergie as well, and he would ice them out. You know, he wouldn't speak to them. I think Fergie, he wouldn't even be in the same room with her for like 30 years. And even to the point where, you know, when it was Christmas time at Sandringham and the royal family gets together, you know, Fergie's ex-husband Andrew would go, their daughters would go, and Fergie would be expected to spend Christmas alone for 30 years because Prince Philip refused to be in the same room with her.
Wow.
So that's kind of, you know, an insight into Philip. But the reason that people have drawn this comparison with Will is because he's taken a very similar stance, allegedly, with Harry and Meghan. You know, after Spare, after the repeated betrayals, he doesn't want to risk it. He wants to keep them out of, not only out of the sort of royal spotlight, but away from the events and away from the senior royals. And I think Will's kind of concerned maybe that, you know, Charles is a little bit more open to forgiving Harry, and there's a vulnerability there, I think. And I think Will's very protective of his father, but he's also protective of the monarchy.
Yeah, protective of his family. I think it's a fair stance to take. If my brother had made some money and spilt some family secrets with Netflix deals and on Spotify, I don't know how I would feel about letting him back in. But Riley Sullivan, so great to speak with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.